He's never been to this town, but led us straight to a house that shouldn't be familiar. My life is a blur of interchangeable towns. As a regional consultant, I spend my weeks driving through the quiet heartland of the country, visiting places that all seem to share the same DNA: a single main street, a courthouse square, a friendly diner. They are good towns, full of good people, but they are anonymous to me. They are just pins on a map. I never expected one of these towns, a place I'd never been, a place that should have been utterly forgettable, to hold a memory that belonged to my son. We were making a family trip out of it. My wife, Sarah, had suggested it. Instead of my usual lonely drive, she and our 6-year-old son, Daniel, came along. The town was called Harmony Creek. It was exactly what I expected. Charming, quiet, and identical to 100 other towns I'd seen. We arrived in the late afternoon, looking for a motel before my meeting the next morning. We were driving through the residential streets when Daniel, who had been quietly watching the world go by from his car seat, spoke up. His voice was soft, but held a strange note of authority. "Turn left here, Daddy." I glanced at Sarah, a smile playing on my lips. "Oh, yeah? You playing navigator, buddy?" "Just turn," he said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Amused, I made the turn onto a street lined with oak trees. We drove for a block. "Now, right," he said. I obeyed. We were on a quiet lane of modest, well-kept houses. After another block, he said, "Stop here." I pulled the car over. I looked around. There was nothing to see. Just a simple 2-story white house with a wide front porch and a swing. It was pleasant, but perfectly ordinary. "Why are we stopping, Daniel?" Sarah asked from the passenger seat. Daniel didn't answer her. He was just staring at the house, his face pressed against the window. The look on his face was one I'd never seen before. It was a look of profound, heartbreaking longing. After a long moment of silence, he turned to me. "I know this place," he whispered. "This is the way home." Home. The word landed in the quiet car with the force of a physical blow. This was not our home. This was a town we'd entered for the first time 20 minutes ago. We tried to laugh it off, to distract him with talk of dinner and finding a motel with a swimming pool. But the incident lingered, a strange and unsettling chord in the symphony of our trip. The next day, after my meeting was over, Daniel asked if we could go back. "I want to see the house again," he said. Reluctantly, we agreed. We drove back to the quiet street and parked. This time, we got out of the car. Daniel walked to the edge of the property, to the line where the sidewalk met the neat green lawn, and stopped. He wouldn't step any further, as if an invisible wall stood in his way. He looked at the porch swing, which was swaying gently in the breeze. "She used to read stories there," he said, his voice barely audible, "to her little girl." He then lifted his arm and pointed to a second-story window on the right. That was her room, the little girl's. At night, she had a lamp with stars on it that made patterns on the ceiling. The details were so intimate, so specific. He wasn't describing a house he had lived in. He was describing a house he had watched. This began a strange and melancholic ritual. Every time my work took me within 100 miles of Harmony Creek, Daniel would ask to go back. He never wanted to knock on the door. He never wanted to play on the lawn. He just wanted to stand on the sidewalk and watch, his face full of that same quiet, inexplicable yearning. He started talking about the family who lived there, a family he called the Lucky Ones. He knew the little girl's name was Lily. He knew her father parked his big green car in the driveway every day at 5 o'clock. He knew her mother grew roses along the porch railing. He knew the intimate details of a life that was not his. I am a practical man. I deal in logistics and data. But I could not find a logical explanation for my son's behavior. I was watching him grieve for a life he'd never lived, for a home that was never his. The quiet sadness that enveloped him whenever we were near that house was becoming a part of him, and I couldn't bear it. I had to understand. On my next trip, I went to Harmony Creek alone. I went to the town hall, to the clerk's office where the old property records were kept. I looked up the address of the White House. The record showed that it had been built in 1947 and owned by a single family until the mid-1980s. The family's name was Abernathy. The record listed the owners, George and Eleanor Abernathy, and it listed their only child, a daughter, born in 1948. Her name was Lillian. Lily. The blood drained from my face. A girl was real. The family was real. But my son was not a part of it. His connection was from the outside, looking in. Who was he? Who was the boy who had watched this family with such love and longing? My search changed. I was no longer investigating the house. I was investigating its orbit. I went to the local library and began looking through the town newspaper archives from the 1950s, the era when Lily would have been a little girl, the age my son was now. I was looking for a clue, for another story running parallel to the happy life of the Abernathys. I found it. It was a small human interest piece from the Christmas edition of 1956. The article was about the Harmony Creek Children's Home, a local orphanage that had stood just a few blocks away from the White House on the hill. The article spoke of the lonely lives of the boys who lived there, their hopes for adoption. It was accompanied by a grainy photograph of a group of solemn-faced boys standing on the orphanage steps. Most of the boys were looking at the camera, but one of them, a small, thin boy with large, dark eyes, was looking away. His gaze was directed off to the side, up the hill, his expression one of pure, unadulterated yearning. It was a look I recognized. I saw it on my own son's face every time we came to this town. I read the caption beneath the photo. It identified the boys. My eyes scanned the names, and there it was. Leo Peters, age 8, who told this reporter his only wish is to one day live in a real house with a porch swing. The world tilted. The archives room seemed to fade to gray. My son Daniel was not, and had never been, a member of the lucky Abernathy family. He was Leo Peters, the orphan boy from down the street. The house wasn't his before home. It was the home he had spent his entire lonely childhood praying for. Watching from a distance, a perfect, unattainable symbol of the warmth, safety, and love he was denied. He wasn't remembering a life he had lived. He was remembering a life he had desperately wanted. The drive home was a blur. I was overwhelmed by a sorrow so profound it felt like a physical weight. This wasn't a story of a tragic death or a violent end. It was a story of a quiet, unnoticed, and unfulfilled life. A life of pure longing. I finally understood my son. I understood his shyness, his quiet nature, his deep, abiding need for closeness. It was the echo of Leo, the boy who had nothing. My life as a father was suddenly recast. I wasn't just raising my son. I was giving Leo Peters everything he had ever dreamed of. Before we left Harmony Creek for what I knew would be the last time, I drove back to the house. I parked the car, but this time I got out and opened Daniel's door. "Come on, buddy," I said softly. He hesitated, looking at the invisible wall at the edge of the lawn. "It's okay," I said, taking his hand. "You belong here." I walked him up the path, his small hand trembling in mine. We walked onto the grass. We walked up the steps and onto the wide front porch. I led him to the swing and sat down, pulling him into my lap. He didn't speak. He just sat there with me, his body finally relaxing. He looked at the front door, at the windows, at the rose bush his other self had known so well. The deep, aching sadness in his eyes was still there, but it was softer now, like a memory that had finally been touched. We never went back to Harmony Creek. Daniel has never mentioned the White House or the lucky family again. It's as if I finally setting foot on that porch, by sitting on the swing he had only ever seen from a distance. A 70-year-old prayer was finally answered. I am a father. I always believed my job was to provide my son with a good future. I never imagined that my real purpose was to give him a piece of a past he had always dreamed of. And I know now, with a certainty that settles deep in my bones, that the love I feel for him is more than just a bond in this life. It is a quiet promise, kept across time and space, to finally, after a lifetime of waiting, bring a lonely little boy all the way home.